Welcome. This video is to explain the significance of the Consumer Guarantees Act and why it is important for small and medium-sized enterprises to be aware of these laws in order to avoid any litigation issues. The Consumer Guarantees Act set out practical implications safeguarding businesses into ensuring that they provide their consumers with quality guarantees. The Consumer Guarantees Act applies to consumers and businesses who operate in New Zealand. Businesses that provide consumer goods and services include tradespeople, professionals, importers, finance companies, retailers, and online traders. It makes sure consumers get what they're paid for, and if needed, providing a repair, refund, or replacement for a faulty product or substandard service. Basically, CGA applies to people in trade. Let us first understand who is a consumer. Consumers are defined in the CGA as individual companies and other legal entities which acquire goods and services from suppliers of a kind ordinarily acquired for personal, household, or domestic use or consumption. The word acquire can refer to owning something through a gift, purchasing, exchanging, leasing, and hiring. If you've acquired a good from any of those activities, then you are a consumer.
Customers are guaranteed that their products will be acceptable, quality fit particular purpose, match the descriptions, a reasonable price, have the right to resell their products, and be delivered in a timely fashion.
Meanwhile, guaranteed for service include being carried out with reasonable care and skill, fixed for particular purpose, carried out in a reasonable time frame, and be reasonably charged when a price is not set. It is important to note that if customers have used the goods in an inappropriate manner, or they have been made aware of its faults and defects prior to the sale, then the CGA does not apply.
When consumers are dissatisfied, companies need to compensate. The consumers have a right to claim remedies against the manufacturers. If the item is not remedied within a reasonable time frame, can't be fixed, or has a failure of substantial character, then the consumer can reject the goods and ask for a replacement or a refund. In addition to these rights, consumers may also claim for any reasonably foreseeable extra loss that results from the initial problem. So for instance, if your new microwave won't work properly, you can claim for damage cost or the cost of hiring a replacement microwave while the first one is being fixed. It is possible to contract out of the CGA, meaning that you will not be held accountable to the requirements or obligations of the Act. To do so, there are a few conditions that must be met. Firstly, it has to be a business-to-business transaction. Both sides must agree to contract out, and it must be a written agreement. It can't be a verbal agreement, otherwise it is not binding. It must be fair and reasonable that both sides wish to opt out of the Consumer Guarantees Act. If those who don't fit the requirements attempt to contract out of the Consumer Guarantees Act, they can be in breach of the Fair Trading Act. Penalties include an up to $600,000 fine for companies and a $200,000 fine for individuals. It is important for the small and medium-sized enterprises to familiarize themselves with the Consumer Guarantees Act, so they are aware of the practical consequences for their business practices. This means businesses are not able to take shortcuts and rip the customers off or deliver products at unreasonable standards. Suppliers of goods as a result will need to take care that their product is quality checked and suitable for the purposes it is sold for. This means higher cost of production to regulate quality, a higher duty of care for items that are sold to consumers, as well as overall better products for consumers. All of these stem from the CGA and ensure that goods are provided at a reasonable standard. Furthermore, service providers must ensure their services are of a reasonable standard. Particularly speaking, this means hiring those performing the job must be high to ensure qualification. This holds business services to a particularly high standard, changing the way they operate and making sure they hold the same duty of care as if they were selling any other product. This is crucial for SMEs to abide by the CGA to avoid consequential loss.